Good evening, Blade enthusiasts, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Studio GDT Reviews. Tonight we're taking a look at another ShadowDancer sword, this one in the form of the unassumingly named 1095 Sashikomi polished katana. You take a look at it on the website, and it doesn't appear to be a lot. I wasn't very impressed by what I saw, at least on paper. The pictures seemed very, very simple, and it wasn't until I received this sword where I saw how much elegance and beauty was in its simplicity. So I got really excited about doing this review because it was a departure from some of the things that I had done in the past. I mentioned some of that as far as my personal taste on Hamon later on in the review, but I really hope that you guys stick through and take a look at this because this became one of my favorite swords on the rack very, very quickly. It is so gorgeous and crisp and clean, yet simple and doesn't shout, "Hey, look at me, I'm a Longshuan katana." So stay tuned to the rest of this review here, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's get the legal stuff out of the way real quick. I'm an amateur kenjutsu student. I do not claim to be an expert or extremely knowledgeable. I'm also an amateur sword reviewer. So, as always, please take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is a review sample, so if you think that I'm going to tell you something special about it as a result, you might want to tune out. But I can assure you, this is the same review as if I paid for it out of my own funds. So, let's take a look. The 1095 Sashikomi, or as I will call it from this point forward, the Paulownia, is truly a beautiful sword. If you take a look at ShadowDancer's website, you'll notice that it starts at $410 as shown. You will also notice that the Tsuba that is on the website is different from what I have on my review sample. They did do a change. I think that's going to work to everyone's benefit as it works better with the motif and for a few other reasons that I will explain later. My model that we're reviewing today was $490 as configured because I opted for a different Sageo, which I'll go into detail later. Now you can take a look at the general measurements and other details of the sword, and let's take a look at the rest of that up close. I've had 3 ShadowDancer swords so far, each at a different price point, and they've all had very excellent tsuka. They're extremely elegant, nice clean lines, attention to detail has been paid. This is a very clean Haichi shape, and you'll notice that there aren't any edges or bumps or anything like that. I'm quickly becoming a fan. The fittings on this sword are of extremely high quality and some of my favorite. You'll notice the Paulownia theme throughout, Nanakoji throughout, and just a cast that is unlike most things that I've seen out there. You'll notice a very sharp ledge, however, on the Koshirae here. From a practitioner's standpoint, I will say that it does rub into your palm quite a bit. Now, over time, that might wear down, but from a heavy use standpoint, you would probably want to keep that in mind. It's not a flaw of the company, it's a crisp cast. It's something that doesn't happen that often. The Tsuka features expertly inlaid real Samegawa panels, not strips that are glued to the exterior of a Tsuka core. Again, a feature that I think is really nice to have on a sword of this price point. The Menuki continue the theme on and are extremely high quality, just like everything else on this sword. If you would have seen my previous ShadowDancer review on the basic Musashi, I talked about Zisei putting their name on the Fuchi and about how I thought that was good if you had something unique. The only place where I say you can't really do that or it won't hold up is if it's obviously a copy of something historical. I do feel historical fittings are almost like the equivalent of open source, and anybody can really clone them and you can't really get mad about that. Talking about these historical fittings and the Paulownia theme in general, let's have a little time for a samurai segue. When I first received this sword, I was really impressed by the fittings, but the design was unfamiliar to me, so I had to do a little bit of research. In finding that the motif was a reference to the Paulownia tree, there were multiple samurai clan that utilized it, as well as the great Toyotomi Hideyoshi. And basically the number of flowers that were present on it kind of indicated the status level of the wearer. So Toyotomi had the most number of flowers present, and then your lower clans would have a lower number of flowers present, as shown on this sword. In contrast to the basic Musashi, this sword features standard Hishigami as opposed to the Hishigami Pro. You do get a little bit more movement out of this Ito as opposed to on the basic Musashi. However, I think the big difference is really in the uniformity of the diamonds that the basic Musashi had. If you take a look at the side profile, you'll notice that the Hishigami still gives this excellent definition, which of course translates to strong feel in the hands. It does really, really feel nice in the hands. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the Tsuba because they changed it, and it was for good reason. The new design matches the rest of the theme, and on the previous design that I had, it was cut rather sharp, so that all that open Tsuba work for a practitioner, it did kind of eat away at the fingers and the knuckles. I think that will be remedied with the new design. A nice inclusion at this price point is the Copper Seppa and Copper Habaki. Very beefy design with the internal shelf that aids in alignment. You'll see a very, very clean alignment to the Hamachi and the Munemachi. This is something that ShadowDancer is known for, and I definitely appreciate. As you can see here, the sword to saya fit was fantastic. Everything was flush and in alignment with each other. There was no filing that needed to be done. Definitely some attention to detail here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the review, I opted for an upgraded saya that switched to a standard gloss lacquered appearance along with buffalo horn fittings. So we've got the buffalo horn Koriguchi, Kurikata, and Kojiri. They have a kind of natural finish to them. They're not painted. At first I thought it was paint that was removed, and upon further inspection, it appears that that is how they were supposed to look. And now we get to my favorite part of the review, and my favorite part about this sword specifically. The absolutely gorgeous 1095 differentially hardened mono steel Sashikomi polished blade. This thing is an absolute work of art. Not only does it have an incredible polish on it, especially for the price point, but it has incredible lines. Let's take a look at it in a little bit more detail. The Tsukuri Komi is of Shinogi-Zukuri style with a very modest 1.5 centimeter sori. Not too extreme, just about right. There's a reasonable amount of niku present on the blade, and you'll notice extremely chiseled and straight blade flats. No waviness going on this bad boy. The Hamon is a near-perfect implementation of Saguha. Normally I'm not a fan of that style, and I remember talking to a friend about it once, and they said, if you don't like Saguha, it's because you haven't seen it done right yet. The minute I pulled this sword out of the saya, I said, I completely understand what I was told at that point. Most Chinese mass production katanas can't do Saguha correctly. It's always too wavy, more undulating. This is done absolutely perfectly. It's very Nioi deki, or heavy Nioi, as you can see with a very, very clear white line at the edge of that temper line. The polish, the Sashikomi polish, is worth every penny as it's figured into the cost of the sword, whatever that might be. With my current equipment, it's very hard to catch polish quality in video. In these still shots, I think you can really see just how pretty this sword is for a monosteel non-folded blade. It really is gorgeous. Taking a look at the Kasaki, it is geometric and you can see how crisp their lines are. Again, it just does not feel like a $410 sword at a starting price point. The sword is a bit on the heavier side and does not feature any hi, so I was not able to produce any audible tachikaze with my very, very skilled one-handed swing suit. The wind prevented me from getting decent paper cutting tests, but I can assure you that it was plenty sharp right out of the box. Well, there you have it. I mean, the unique Paulownia themed furniture that's on here that you just don't really see that often anymore. Not to mention that, but the fact that how crisply and precisely executed the beautiful Saguha Hamon and the very, very crisp and clean and bright and precise Sashikomi polish at, as configured for the review, $490, it's hard to beat. You go back to the standard Ishime Saya at $410, and you still have the amazing fittings, the excellent Tsuka, the beautiful Hamon, the beautiful polish, So this particular sword, I think at this price point for what you get, it's very hard to beat. Sometimes when you're in the $350 to $500 price range, you're looking at, am I getting something that's functional and doesn't look very artistic, or am I going with something on the higher end of that price point that is maybe a little bit more artistic but lacks functionality? I think this sword does an incredible job of blending the both of those and having a very classical, authentic look to it. So I think ShadowDancer knocked it out of the park with this one. The updates to it just make it a little bit more complete. You know, the changing of the Tsuba on it, I think, is a big deal. So hopefully if anybody is interested in purchasing it from this point forward, they really like the change that is different from the sword that was in the review. But all in all, ShadowDancer, that's 2 for 2 for me on them. So hopefully we'll see some more from them in the future.